Session where people tend to want to take a break and so on, but we are sure we're going to give you a lot to think about and stay awake here. We've chosen the very narrow topic of the future of the public authority as a way to provide consumer-directed services in America. So this is meant to be, and let me back up and say, my name is Donna Kalame, and I'm Executive Director of the San Francisco IHSS Public Authority. San Francisco was the third county to institute a public authority before they were mandated, so our Board of Supervisors passed the ordinance where we were created in 1995, and I worked on that, and with Rick actually getting the public authority established in San Francisco, and have been the executive director since then. I think this session will be very interesting, and I'm hoping that my fellow panelists will quickly introduce themselves, and we can see, and then we'll move on and get into the topic. But here's Deb Roth.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay. I'm Deb Roth, Policy Director with SEIU United Long-Term Care Workers, and it's nice to be here. This is my third SECA conference, and I work on issues. Lately, it's been related to the state budget. We're, trying to protect IHSS funding.
And I'm Rick Zawatsky. I'm with RTZ Associates. I've been involved with development of community services for over 30 years. Helped in the development of adult day services, the development of the PACE program, worked with the independent living centers, Berkeley CIL, and then had the good fortune of working with public authorities from their conception stage to their implementation. And my background is to help programs develop the services and to refine the services to be able to address the critical needs of the consumers.
So folks, this is a very interesting panel, but I think it is a challenging panel because there really are a lot of balls in the air right now around long-term supports and services, and the federal government finally starting to be more serious about paying attention to how our nation is going to support and provide for people who need long-term services and supports. I just wanted to throw out that I think the public authorities can be very pivotal in passing along the lessons we've learned about trying to improve the form of home and community-based services, which is where consumers have so much choice and control over what happens, hiring independent providers. There are a lot of lessons we've learned about how to improve that kind of a program and how important it can be. From the beginning in San Francisco, we have viewed our public authority obviously to improve IHSS as a program, but honestly it was even broader than that we've always worked on, which would be, again, a mode of service where consumers retain so much control over what happens for them, who comes into their home to assist them, and showing that it can be done in a very cost-effective way. And I think people don't fully realize that actually IHSS is quite unique in the United States and is the program that has been looked at by the federal government as succeeding. And we all know in this room there are many problems and issues still where we need to improve IHSS. But the reality is many of the things that the IHSS program does are the direction that we could be moving in. I've known too in the nearly 25 years that I've been working very directly in the arena of trying to cultivate more home and community-based services that our nation would be forced by demographics, if nothing else, to deal with long-term services and supports. And as I say, I think that that's really beginning to happen. So that's where we are here today, and we know that statewide, obviously IHSS is a target in the budget. When I first started working on IHSS issues, it's not as if it was ignored, but we certainly weren't a target. We were kind of flying under the radar. And now there have been enough improvements where the financial implications, the number of people who need the service, type of service that IHSS provides, has really terrified people, policymakers and legislators, about what we're going to face. So we really need to take hold of that, find ways to communicate our experience, and get the best we can out of some of the options that are coming forward. The reason this is challenging is that really there is so much that's happening, that there's a lot of detail, and we don't want to leave people in their tracks. So we're trying not to use acronyms and this kind of thing, but it's going to be difficult. There really are a lot of things happening now. So I wanted to point out in your materials, if you can take the time to read through these. And some of them are fairly dense and a little bit technical, but I think you will learn a lot about what is going on right now around federal proposals and what the state could do to implement some federal initiatives that could be very instructive. So one of it was toward the back of your manuals, I believe. There's a SCAN Foundation brief of several pages. And then I did some notes that are kind of connected to it to maybe help guide you as you read that brief. That might help you get a little bit more of a handle on it. And we did it's numbered, so the numbers here on the notes relate to numbers that are in the margin of the foundation brief, and did some underlining in the brief that might help you highlight some of the things. There's another issue brief that came out that's even more detailed in a way than the first one, but it's very, very good, by Diane Justice. And then this article, which I found very interesting, about the unfortunate situation that we're in, where the kind of service that IHSS is, and Olmsted ideas about people with disabilities having a human and civil right to not be put into institutions if they can receive services and assistance and support in the community. And right at that juncture, of course, we're having these economic battles. So there's some very good law and things on the book, and then it's very hard to get implemented. So all of these I hope you'll find interesting as you read through materials when you go from here. With that, some of the things that we want to focus on here today are that there really was, with the federal health care reform, a big step forward for people with disabilities and aging, folks who need some support services. And part of that reform is called the CLASS Act, Community Living Attendant Services. I always forget the exact acronym. Now this is for people who work, and through a payroll, they'll be able to build up a social insurance kind of situation. And a few years out, this might not help a number of us in this room, but it's at least an acknowledgement of, and to my knowledge, the first acknowledgement by our federal government of really stepping forward and trying to expand how people using public programs or paying into public insurance can begin to try to get themselves covered for long-term services and supports. There are some other initiatives and ideas, and our panelists are going to cover those. I think we're going to be left flooded with ideas, and so if toward the end, we'd love your ideas of how CECA can focus on these and find a way to provide input on how to actually implement these ideas. But I hope people really understand that we are at a very crucial juncture where finally the United States and our state are being forced to and are looking at ways to provide long-term services and supports to people who need it. So that was maybe a lengthy introduction, but move on to Deb right now.
Thank you, Donna. What I wanted to focus on is really two aspects of healthcare reform that we're looking at within SEIU. I think that Rick will then talk about some of the other options and ideas and programs that are potentially out there. Within the union, and actually not just the union, but all stakeholders, we're coming off of what has been a bruising, difficult budget fight. And you know, sometimes the best way we can talk about it is to say that we have lived to fight another day. And the IHSS program did suffer a small cut in the budget, but compared to what the governor was proposing in January, which was practically the complete obliteration of the program, a 3.6% cut seems a little more manageable. But we have some opportunities. Unfortunately, we're still in the difficult budget fights, and I think that, you know, Donna mentioned the difficult economic battle that we're in. So I think it's really important that we figure out a way to all work together, and that includes the public authorities, in order to maximize our ability, our strength in numbers, and our common ground to put some creative thinking into protecting the budget for IHSS and growing beyond the existing program. I don't know how many of you are aware that we created something as part of the budget solution this year of a provider fee. That just could people show me by hands? Have people heard about that? Is it in the state budget? Great. The IHSS provider fee that was enacted. Yes, that is correct, actually. That is the proper title of it. And what that is going to do is bring in eventually $190 million per year, which helped to reduce the amount that the state was seeking to cut the program. Now, this type of approach is something that has been done in other healthcare settings, like nursing homes and hospitals, but it hadn't been done in home care. And it required a lot of thinking outside the box. And people said we couldn't do it. And it's true that the federal government hasn't yet approved it, but the point is the state enacted it as legislation, the governor signed it, so we're on the way to getting it approved by the federal government. And that's the important kind of creative thinking that we need to bring to all of these challenges in order to protect funding and move forward. So I want to encourage that kind of collaboration and creativity. And let me just mention a couple of things. Donna talked about the CLASS Act, and I have it here, what it's, the Community Living Assistance Services and Supports, because I know you said we're not going to use acronyms. The fact of the matter is, the CLASS Act, it's really peculiar that anything ended up in healthcare reform related to long-term care. I think that a lot of people thought when all of the heavy lifting started that there would be nothing related to long-term care, but there's actually 3 provisions. And ironically enough, or 3 major provisions, I should say. Ironically enough, one of them we don't even qualify for in California because we have so much home and community-based services. So I'm going to mention the other 2. The CLASS Act was Ted Kennedy's legacy. This is something he's been trying to do for a number of years, and perhaps his passing had something to do with the CLASS Act making it into the final version. And as Donna mentioned, it is a payroll tax with an opt-out. So it's voluntary, but you have to opt out of it. It will start in the year 2013, money being taken out of people's paychecks. Now, I don't know, I have a hard time figuring out just how this is going to work because premiums are estimated to be somewhere in the range of $120, $140, $160 a month. You would have to pay into it for 5 years before you would be eligible for collecting anything.